It's not a Jewish protest outside. It's a protest of those who support the violence that is going on in Gaza.
There's clearly a wide spectrum of views here, and by definition, that's going to mean extremism on both sides. It also means definitions of anti-Semitism.
In recent months, the United Kingdom and France have taken unprecedented steps in handling large groups of pro-Palestine protesters, arresting and deporting many participants in response to escalating tensions and demonstrations. This move has sparked widespread debate and criticism, highlighting the complex interplay between freedom of speech, public order, and national security in both countries. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. In the UK, the pro-Palestine protests have been notably significant, drawing thousands of participants across various cities. These demonstrations were initially sparked by renewed conflict in the Middle East, with protesters voicing their solidarity with Palestinians and condemning the actions of the Israeli government. The protests, while largely peaceful, occasionally saw clashes with law enforcement, leading to a heightened state of alert among British authorities. In response, the UK government has taken a firm stance, citing the need to maintain public order and prevent any escalation of violence. The British authorities have employed a variety of measures to manage the protests, including the deployment of significant police forces, the use of surveillance, and the enforcement of strict public order laws. However, the most controversial actions have been the arrests and subsequent deportations of numerous protesters. The UK government has justified these measures by arguing that they are necessary to prevent public disorder and protect national security. Critics, however, argue that these actions infringe upon the fundamental rights to freedom of speech and peaceful assembly. One high-profile incident involved the arrest and deportation of several foreign nationals who participated in the protests. These individuals were accused of inciting violence and disrupting public order, leading to their expedited removal from the country. This has led to accusations of heavy-handedness and xenophobia, with many arguing that the government is using immigration laws to silence dissenting voices. Human rights organizations have condemned these actions, calling for greater transparency and adherence to international standards regarding the treatment of protesters. In France, the situation has been similarly contentious. Pro-Palestine protests have been met with a robust response from the French authorities, who have also employed a range of measures to manage the demonstrations. The French government, like its British counterpart, has emphasized the need to maintain public order and prevent violence. However, the use of arrests and deportations has been particularly controversial in the French context, given the country's strong tradition of protest and freedom of expression. The French authorities have justified their actions by pointing to instances of violence and anti-Semitic rhetoric at some of the protests. In several cases, protesters were accused of inciting hatred and violence, leading to their arrests and subsequent deportations. These actions have sparked a fierce debate in France, with many arguing that the government is overstepping its bounds and infringing upon fundamental rights. Critics have pointed out that the measures disproportionately target certain groups, particularly those of Middle Eastern and North African descent, raising concerns about discrimination and the erosion of civil liberties. The French government has also faced criticism from international human rights organizations, which have called for a more measured and transparent approach to handling protests. These organizations argue that the right to protest is a fundamental democratic principle and that any restrictions on this right should be carefully balanced against the need to maintain public order. They have also raised concerns about the use of deportations, arguing that this measure is overly punitive and can have serious consequences for the individuals involved. The actions of the UK and French governments have also drawn attention to the broader geopolitical context in which these protests are occurring. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has long been a deeply contentious issue, with strong opinions and emotions on both sides. The recent escalation of violence in the region has brought this issue to the forefront, prompting widespread protests and demonstrations around the world. In this context, the responses of the UK and French governments can be seen as part of a broader trend of increasing state control and repression in response to political dissent. This trend is not unique to the UK and France. Around the world, governments are grappling with how to handle large-scale protests and demonstrations, particularly those that touch on sensitive political issues. In many cases, authorities have opted for a hardline approach, using arrests, deportations, and other measures to maintain control and prevent unrest. This raises important questions about the balance between security and civil liberties, and the role of the state in managing dissent. In the UK, the government's approach has been shaped by a number of factors, including concerns about terrorism and extremism. The country has experienced several high-profile terrorist attacks in recent years, leading to a heightened focus on security and the need to prevent radicalization. In this context, the authorities have argued that they need to take a firm stance against any activities that could incite violence or undermine public order. However, this approach has been criticized for its potential to alienate and marginalize certain communities, particularly those of Muslim and Middle Eastern descent. The UK government has also faced criticism for its handling of the protests in the context of broader concerns about civil liberties. In recent years, there has been growing concern about the erosion of fundamental rights in the UK, with a number of high-profile cases highlighting issues such as surveillance, police powers, and restrictions on freedom of speech. The government's response to the pro-Palestine protests has been seen by many as part of this broader trend, raising questions about the future of civil liberties in the country. In France, the government's approach has been similarly influenced by concerns about security and extremism. The country has also experienced a number of terrorist attacks in recent years, leading to a heightened focus on preventing radicalization and maintaining public order. The French authorities have argued that they need to take a firm stance against any activities that could incite violence or undermine national security. However, this approach has also been criticized for its potential to alienate and marginalize certain communities, particularly those of Muslim and Middle Eastern descent. The French government has also faced criticism for its handling of the protests in the context of broader concerns about civil liberties. France has a strong tradition of protest and freedom of expression, and any restrictions on these rights are highly contentious. The government's response to the pro-Palestine protests has been seen by many as part of a broader trend of increasing state control and repression, raising questions about the future of civil liberties in the country. The actions of the UK and French governments have also had significant implications for international relations. Both countries have long-standing relationships with Israel and the Palestinian territories, and their responses to the protests have been closely watched by other nations. The use of arrests and deportations has been criticized by many as disproportionate and heavy-handed, raising concerns about the impact on diplomatic relations and the broader geopolitical context. In the UK, the government's approach has been influenced by its close relationship with Israel. The UK has traditionally been a strong supporter of Israel, and this has shaped its response to the pro-Palestine protests. The government's firm stance has been seen by many as an attempt to maintain this relationship and demonstrate its commitment to supporting Israel. However, this approach has also been criticized for its potential to alienate and marginalize certain communities, particularly those of Palestinian descent. In France, the government's approach has been influenced by its complex relationship with both Israel and the Palestinian territories. France has traditionally taken a more balanced approach to the conflict, supporting a two-state solution and calling for negotiations between the parties. However, the government's response to the pro-Palestine protests has been seen by many as a departure from this approach, raising questions about its commitment to supporting a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The use of arrests and deportations has also had significant implications for domestic politics in both countries. In the UK, the government's approach has been shaped by a number of factors, including concerns about terrorism and extremism, as well as broader issues related to immigration and integration. The government's firm stance has been seen by many as an attempt to demonstrate its commitment to maintaining public order and protecting national security. However, this approach has also been criticized for its potential to alienate and marginalize certain communities, particularly those of Muslim and Middle Eastern descent. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, do you support the UK and France's actions against pro-Palestine protesters? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.